This was inevitable. As following a wild season for Nick Robertson, the inevitable has happened. A brand new report has dropped, revealing some massive details as it pertains to his future in Toronto to change the landscape of this player's future going forward. To break that down, as well as discuss some other updates surrounding the Toronto Maple Leafs on this episode. Before we get into it, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, you're just the place to be for daily Leafs content. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you guys again for your support over here. We are on the road to 25,000 subscribers. You guys have been beasts, so thank you guys for that. There's a lot to go over today. We're taking a step back from some of the free agency talks outside of the Toronto Maple Leafs and talking about a pending free agent for the Leafs, and it is none other than Nick Robertson today, and the inevitable has happened as reports have finally started to come out confirming what we all, some fans I guess feared, but what a lot of people expected and some of course didn't expect, and that is that Nick Robertson is likely headed elsewhere this offseason per Jonas Siegel. Only played in 3 of the 13 playoff games, but again, he is an RFA at this point, and the Leafs don't want to bring him back, according to Jonas Siegel. I believe Elliot Friedman also said a similar thing. All signs at this point point to Nick Robertson heading elsewhere, and it was inevitable that following this year, you think back to his whole career, his career trajectory is almost a little bit sad now to think back on because he had a lot of upside. First year under Craig Berube, played a lot of games, didn't necessarily produce the way that we expected, especially after even his last season with Sheldon Keefe, and now it's all but confirmed that he's going to be headed elsewhere.
Yeah, we were talking about this exact story last offseason for a long time until he signed. But it looks like at this point, there will be a trade. So keep in mind, he is a free agent, but he is still an RFA, similar to last year. So the Leafs still have control. But yeah, they're going to have to get a trade done here. And I don't think that he's long for this team. I think that, it's done at this point. It made sense for him to sign last season to come back one more year. And honestly, I think a lot of people, even including myself, thought that he was going to be scratched a lot more often than he was. I thought Berube actually did trust him in a lot of situations, maybe not so much in the playoffs, but during the regular season, which we know that Nick Robertson isn't necessarily a playoff guy, right? So he did trust him in the regular season. He did have a decent season, but I think it is time for both of them to part ways. And you said that he had a lot of upside. I still think that he does have a lot of upside. I think that, and it's pretty ironic that now if Mitch Marner's leaving, there is technically a spot there in the top 6 for him. But I haven't seen it with this group at least. So I think it is time to move off of the player. And again, I still think he could be a 30-goal scorer on another team. I honestly do, in a top 6 role, maybe a little bit of a worse team that could use him in their top 6. But again, I think it's ironic that finally a top 6 spot will kind of open up for him depending on what happens in free agency. And they're probably moving off of the player. But I think it's time. Probably a change of scenery is good for him after everything that happened last season and obviously last offseason, because that was a little messy as well. And it took some time to get that contract done. But yeah, I think it's time that both parties move on. But again, don't be surprised if he goes to another team and scores 20, 25, 30 goals.
Yeah, it is possible. I don't think the Leafs, and they do need depth. They need scoring, they need depth scoring, all these different things. And in theory, we talk about how the bottom 6 desperately needed scoring. Nick Robertson's game, it just doesn't fit the style that Craig Berube wants to play. And he also didn't produce. He got a lot of chances last year under Craig Berube, more than we thought, and he wasn't able to score this year, and he wasn't able to put up the production that he did even in the year before with Sheldon Keefe. And again, you can see here Nick Robertson's future with the Maple Leafs suddenly clear after the insider's report from Jonas Siegel. And you can see here, it's also interesting because you mentioned it, he's an RFA, there still could be a trade. Robertson's second paragraph there showed himself at times like a promising offensive weapon, although his lack of size has made it a challenge to keep him on the Leafs' bottom 6, even if offense in that area is needed. And Toronto has prioritized physicality and size more than Dubas' Toronto's team, and Robertson has been hard to justify placing his, putting his, faith in Nick Robertson. And, we saw times where Nick Robertson was a beast and really for his size be aggressive out there, but most of the time, and we speak about it, he'd take the flyer on a horrible penalty. He wouldn't provide you anything unless he was scoring, and when he's not scoring, you'd rather have Pontus Holmberg out there. And that's why Pontus Holmberg got the majority of, second line minutes this year, third line minutes, all these different things. And it's at the point now where it doesn't fit the Craig Berube style, but there is some people out there who think this, which I completely disagree with, but it is what it is, would score 41 goals a season with a coach who knew how to use him. There is upside there, and there's no doubt about it. He just hasn't really found it with the Leafs, and that's another reason as to why it's clearer than ever. I don't think Nick Robertson should want to return to Toronto if he thinks that he's going to be able to have a decent season elsewhere and actually get a proper payday, which is what, of course, all these players are after at the end of the day alongside a Stanley Cup. So I think it's best to, move on from both sides, but very clear here. And this is why we haven't heard much rumblings, the Leafs being interested in bringing him back. We're hearing depth pieces. Claude Giroux, like we covered earlier today. Of course, all these different, even Jonathan Toews, we've heard about Brad Marchand. Those guys, of course, on different levels than Nick Robertson. They need depth in the bottom six, and it's not going to be in the form of Nick Robertson this year.
No, and I think, when you're looking at him going to another team like this tweet alludes to, I don't think that it's Craig Berube not knowing how to use him because, it was very similar use to Sheldon Keefe, obviously, right? And, the scratch and score nickname and all of that stuff, right? I don't think that it has to, I think it has to do with the makeup of the team, what the Leafs were, especially the last couple of seasons. Obviously, it's going to be different heading into next season, but the makeup of the team and the fact that, if he wasn't scoring, Nick Robertson, he didn't offer too much more. We saw glimpses of it this season, the physicality, obviously in the playoffs too, for a couple of the games, but it really wasn't there. When he wasn't scoring, he wasn't too effective. And you can't have that in the lineup if it's in the bottom six, right? You have to have that at least higher up in the lineup, and he should be scoring, but it was the current makeup of the team. So it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing in terms of, what they get back for him. I think it's over. I think they are going to trade him. They want to restructure their bottom six. That's for sure. That's another thing I wanted to talk about in this video too, that I don't think it's just him. I think they're going to look at Pontus Holmberg, who's also an RFA. I think they want to look at David Camp, and maybe not a buyout, but trying to trade that one way or another, and doing something about that, even if they have to attach a draft pick to it. So I think they're going to try and restructure their bottom six. I would love to have Steven Lorentz back again. He was fantastic in that role. Obviously, Scott Laughton's probably going to be there, although we don't know, right? Like what's happening with John Tavares, right? Like we don't know exactly where Scott Laughton's going to slot in, but it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But one thing's for sure, I think Nick Robertson's a great player, great offensive player. He has to add more to his tool belt. He scores one way through the triangle and the 5-hole usually. So he's got to add a little bit more. And when he's not scoring, it is a little bit ugly. And I don't know if the Leafs can, deal with that anymore. They're going for a Stanley Cup at this point.
Yeah, we saw him take bad penalties throughout the entire regular season, and then the playoffs in his one, game against the Panthers, and just games in general. He didn't play great, got a bad penalty there. But yeah, only $875,000 cap hit. And you look at some of his advanced, analytics, he has the potential and he has a very good shot, but he's going to have to, find a team that can use him in the way. I mean, Craig Berube is not going to change the style of hockey. And we saw the style of hockey works better than it did under the Sheldon Keefe system. But of course, think back to last year, you can see there are 11 points in 36 games, 7 goals, 4 assists, averaging about 12 minutes of time on ice a game. He had a stretch there where he was really good. He was like the unsung hero, scoring goals during the regular season. It ultimately didn't translate. Not the best matchups for him, with the Senators being physical and the Panthers being, arguably the most physical team that the Leafs could have crossed past and in the NHL. So it's interesting. We think back, though, he had 3 healthy scratches. The entire year he would be healthy scratched for 3 or 4 games. He'd come back, he'd score, and then he'd be scratched again. He has the ability, but it's going to be about whether or not he can actually sustain that over a long period of time. You mentioned the triangle. He needs to add a more dynamic weapon to his game as well. He can't just be a one-dimensional scorer. It gets figured out, but also if you're going up against elite goaltenders like Bobrovsky and like a lot of the goalies you face in the playoffs, they're going to have games where they can just, goalie you and win you the games. If you're not doing anything else out there, that's why most of the teams now that are in the Cup, unless you're a superstar, have players that not only can score and they're best goal scorers, but they're also great defensively. Barkov, Kachuk, all those guys. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And hopefully for the Leafs, they're able to replace what he brought, but also for Nick Robertson. Hopefully he finds his home somewhere else and at least get some value back in the trade. Let us know down below what your thoughts are on that. Things are picking up. Keep you up to date with all the latest news. See you later.